Come As You Are. Intro. Emily Nagoski's Come As You Are is a groundbreaking exploration of female sexuality that shifts the conversation from what women are supposed to be to who they really are. It is a book that reassures, educates, and empowers. Nagoski makes clear from the beginning that sexuality is not something broken that needs to be fixed, but something personal, adaptable, and deeply connected to the unique context of each woman's life. This book is not about comparing yourself to an impossible cultural standard, but about understanding how your body, mind, and emotions work together to create your own sexual well-being. The central message of Come As You Are is simple, yet revolutionary. You are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. If you have ever struggled with desire, pleasure, arousal, or intimacy, those experiences are not signs of dysfunction. They are reflections of how your brain and body respond to the context you are in. Nagoski blends science, storytelling, and compassionate guidance to show women how they can embrace their sexuality without shame or pressure. She begins by challenging the myths that dominate conversations about female sexuality. For centuries, women have been told that they are too complicated, too mysterious, or too fragile to understand. Popular culture paints a narrow picture of female desire, often reducing it to either being passive or being overly eroticized for male pleasure. Nagoski dismantles these harmful ideas with evidence from neuroscience and psychology. She emphasizes that sexuality is not a simple drive or hunger like thirst or hunger, but a highly responsive system influenced by multiple factors including safety, trust, stress, and connection. The heart of her framework is the dual control model, which explains how sexual arousal and inhibition work like a gas pedal and a brake. Everyone has a system that turns sexual response on and another system that turns it off. What determines desire is not whether your accelerator is broken, but whether your brakes are pressed too hard by stress, body image issues, or negative cultural messages. Understanding this balance is the key to unlocking healthy sexuality. The brain is the biggest sex organ. One of the most revolutionary messages in Come As You Are is that the brain is the true center of sexuality. While culture often treats sex as something that begins in the body, Nagoski shows that it always begins in the brain. Every sensation, every desire, and every inhibition is filtered through how your brain interprets the context around you. This means that sexual response is less about perfect anatomy and more about perception, meaning, and emotional safety. For example, a gentle touch from a trusted partner can feel deeply erotic, while the same touch from a stranger can feel threatening or uncomfortable. The difference is not in the touch itself, but in how the brain interprets it. Understanding that your brain is in charge helps remove the pressure of needing to perform or fit into an imagined ideal. Instead, it becomes about creating mental and emotional conditions that allow your brain to relax and respond positively. Stress management, trust, and emotional closeness suddenly become just as important as physical stimulation. Stress, relaxation, and the importance of safety. Nagoski emphasizes that stress is one of the strongest brakes on sexual desire. When the brain perceives threat, even minor stressors like work deadlines, body image concerns, or relationship conflict, the brake system activates to protect you. This protective response is useful for survival, but unhelpful for intimacy. That is why creating a sense of safety is central to sexual well-being. Safety here is not just physical safety, but also emotional safety. Feeling accepted, respected, and valued by your partner can dramatically shift your sexual response. On the other hand, feeling judged, pressured, or dismissed can shut it down. Instantly, she introduces the idea of the stress cycle. Stress is not simply about what happens in life, but also about how your body completes the cycle of stress. If you do not discharge the stress response, it lingers in your body, pressing harder on the brake. Exercise, deep breathing, laughter, affection, and creative expression are all ways to complete the stress cycle. When women learn to manage stress effectively, their sexual responsiveness often improves because their brains stop interpreting daily life as a constant threat. The importance of self-compassion throughout Come As You Are, Nagoski insists on. The power of self-compassion. Many women have been conditioned to criticize themselves for how their sexuality does or does not appear. If they do not feel desire, they assume they are broken. If they do not experience orgasm easily, they assume they are inadequate. This shame becomes another heavy foot on the brake pedal. Self-compassion interrupts this cycle. Instead of blaming yourself, you learn to recognize your experience with kindness. For example, saying to yourself, "It makes sense that I am not feeling desire right now because I am exhausted," is an act of compassion. This mindset removes shame and creates space for curiosity and growth. Nagoski also highlights that sexual well-being is not about reaching some external standard, but about finding what works for you. There is no universal formula. Everyone has their own unique combination of accelerators and brakes, shaped by their history, personality, and current circumstances. By treating yourself with kindness and curiosity, you can discover your personal pathway to pleasure. The myth of spontaneous desire. Popular culture often portrays desire as something that suddenly appears out of nowhere, a spontaneous, urgent hunger. Movies and media frequently show couples jumping into passion without effort. Nagoski explains that while spontaneous desire exists, it is not the most common form of desire for women. For many women, desire is more responsive than spontaneous. This means that arousal often begins after intimacy starts. In other words, you may not feel desire before being touched, kissed, or emotionally engaged, but once the experience begins, your accelerator kicks in. This distinction is crucial because women often assume something is wrong with them if they do not feel spontaneous desire all the time. In reality, responsive desire is just as valid, natural, and healthy. When couples understand this, they stop expecting desire to appear out of thin air and instead focus on creating contexts that invite responsiveness. Pleasure as the measure. A powerful reframe Nagoski offers is that pleasure should be the measure of sexual success, not performance. Many people approach sex with goals like orgasm, frequency, or matching cultural standards. This goal-oriented mindset creates pressure, which activates the brakes. Instead, shifting the focus to pleasure opens up freedom. If the experience feels good, safe, and enjoyable, then it is successful. This pleasure-centered perspective allows couples to slow down, explore, and embrace the journey without anxiety about reaching a specific outcome. This also means that pleasure is not limited to intercourse. Touch, emotional intimacy, laughter, and non-sexual affection all contribute to the landscape of sexual well-being. By valuing pleasure in all its forms, women gain a sense of agency over their sexuality. Anatomy of arousal. To demystify female sexuality, Nagoski explains the complexity of sexual anatomy, especially the clitoris. For decades, women were misinformed about their bodies, with cultural narratives centering male pleasure. Many did not realize that the clitoris is the central organ of female sexual pleasure and that most women do not experience orgasm from penetration alone. The clitoris, far larger than the small external part most people know, extends internally and surrounds the vaginal canal. Its only purpose is pleasure. Understanding this anatomy helps women and their partners stop expecting sex to look a certain way and instead focus on what genuinely creates pleasure. By learning about their bodies without shame, women reclaim a sense of ownership. Sexual knowledge becomes empowerment. The cultural story of sex. Nagoski stresses that one of the biggest breaks on women's sexuality comes not from biology, but from cultural messaging. Society has long shaped narratives about what sex should look like. From movies to magazines, the dominant story has been linear: attraction, kissing, penetration, orgasm. Done. But this narrow script leaves many women feeling broken when their experience does not match. If intercourse alone does not lead to orgasm, women may assume they are flawed. If they do not feel spontaneous desire like characters in movies, they may think something is wrong with them. Nagoski explains that these stories are myths, not reality. She encourages women to step outside this rigid narrative and embrace their own truth. Sexuality is not a performance for others to watch. It is an internal, lived experience. When women unlearn the cultural story, they reclaim the right to define sex in ways that feel good for them: playful, slow, emotional, messy, or simply different from the standard script. The role of body image. Another massive influence on women's sexual experience is body image. Research shows that how a woman feels about her body directly affects her ability to feel pleasure. If she is worried about how she looks during sex, her brain interprets this as a threat, pressing the brakes. For example, a woman who is self-conscious about her stomach or thighs may be distracted during intimacy. Instead of tuning into sensations, her mind is focused on judgment. This mental shift diminishes arousal, even if her partner finds her deeply attractive. Nagoski highlights that positive body image is not about achieving perfection. It is about cultivating trust and kindness toward your body. When women learn to view their bodies with compassion and appreciation, the brakes lift. This does not mean ignoring insecurities, but shifting focus from appearance to experience. A woman who sees her body as worthy of pleasure opens herself to far more fulfilling sexual encounters. The impact of trauma. Nagoski handles the subject of trauma with care. For many women, past experiences, whether sexual trauma, relationship, betrayal, or ongoing emotional harm, become strong brakes on sexual responsiveness. Trauma imprints itself on the nervous system, leaving the body in a heightened state of protection. This does not mean that women with trauma cannot have healthy, joyful sexuality. But it does mean that healing requires patience, compassion, and often professional support. Nagoski reassures survivors that nothing about their response is broken. It is their brain's natural attempt to protect them. The path forward is not to force desire, but to rebuild safety and trust, sometimes over time and sometimes with therapeutic guidance. By naming trauma without stigma, Nagoski validates the experiences of countless women and shows them that recovery and pleasure are possible. The role of relationships. Relationships are the ecosystem in which sexuality either thrives or struggles. Nagoski emphasizes that the quality of the emotional connection between partners strongly influences sexual satisfaction. Conflict, resentment, or miscommunication can press the brakes even when physical attraction is strong. Healthy relationships, on the other hand, nurture desire. Emotional intimacy, trust, and kindness set the stage for sexual connection. Nagoski stresses the importance of open communication. When partners can talk honestly about what they enjoy, what they struggle with, and what they want to explore, both pleasure and closeness deepen. She also highlights that relationships evolve. Desire may look different after years of partnership, compared to the beginning. This is not failure, it is normal. Couples who adapt by creating new contexts for intimacy, trying new experiences, or simply prioritizing connection over routine tend to sustain long-term satisfaction. The good enough sex model. In a culture obsessed with peak performance, Nagoski introduces a liberating idea: good enough sex. Not every encounter has to be perfect or earth-shattering. Expecting fireworks every time only sets couples up for disappointment and pressure. Instead, good enough sex means focusing on presence, connection, and shared pleasure. Some experiences may be brief, others exploratory, some deeply passionate, and others simply comforting. When couples let go of the need to constantly prove passion, they open themselves to authentic intimacy. This model also relieves women from the guilt of not being in the mood all the time. Sexuality can ebb and flow naturally, without meaning the relationship is failing. Accepting good enough creates more space for joy and less stress. The role of non-sexual intimacy. Nagoski reminds readers that sex is not separate from the rest of life. Everyday acts of affection, holding hands, hugging, sharing laughter, contribute significantly to sexual well-being. These forms of connection lower stress, build safety, and activate the accelerator for many couples, creating a foundation of non-sexual intimacy allows sexual intimacy to flourish. When partners feel emotionally cared for, their bodies respond more openly. Small gestures of love and kindness ripple into larger waves of desire. This insight is especially important for long-term relationships. Instead of expecting sex to create intimacy, couples can see intimacy as the soil from which sex naturally grows. The science of orgasm. Nagoski dives into the science of orgasm with clarity and encouragement. She explains that orgasm is a natural function of the nervous system, but it is not always immediate or predictable. Many women need sustained clitoral stimulation to reach orgasm, and there is nothing wrong with this. she debunks the myth that penetrative sex alone should be enough. In fact, only a minority of women regularly orgasm from penetration without additional clitoral stimulation. Recognizing this fact removes shame and opens couples to more creative, pleasurable approaches. Orgasms, she explains, are not the sole marker of success. They are wonderful when they happen, but the overall experience of connection and pleasure matters more. By focusing less on achieving orgasm and more on enjoying the journey, women often find that orgasms come more naturally. The importance of playfulness. Playfulness is an underrated ingredient in sexual well-being. Nagoski emphasizes that sex does not have to be serious or scripted. When couples bring humor, curiosity, and play into intimacy, they reduce pressure and increase pleasure. This might mean experimenting with new positions, introducing fantasies, or simply being silly. Together, play reframes sex from a performance into an exploration. It allows couples to discover what feels good without fear of failure. Play also reduces the fear of rejection. If something does not work, it can be laughed off rather than treated as a disaster. This mindset of openness and fun creates resilience in relationships and keeps intimacy alive. Responsive versus spontaneous desire in relationships. One of the biggest sources of misunderstanding between partners is the difference between spontaneous and responsive desire. Spontaneous desire is what we often see in movies, the sudden urge to jump into passion. Responsive desire, however, comes later, after intimacy has already begun. Nagoski emphasizes that neither type of desire is superior. They are simply different. Many women, especially in long-term relationships, experience desire primarily as responsive. This means they may not feel aroused until after kissing, touching, or emotional connection begins. This knowledge is transformative. For couples, instead of interpreting a lack of spontaneous desire as rejection, partners can see it as an invitation to create the right context. Nagoski explains that when couples understand and respect this difference, they avoid unnecessary conflict and deepen intimacy. Accelerators, brakes, and personal maps. Every person has a unique combination of accelerators and brakes. Accelerators respond to sexual stimuli, sights, sounds, sensations, fantasies, feelings of closeness. Brakes respond to reasons not to engage, stress, fear, distraction, guilt, self-criticism. Nagoski encourages readers to create a personal map of their sexual context. What presses your accelerator? What presses your brakes? By identifying these patterns, women can make intentional choices that support desire. For example, a woman may realize that clutter in her bedroom presses the brake, while music and affectionate touch press the accelerator. Another may discover that feeling emotionally connected through conversation primes her for intimacy more than any physical cue. These maps empower women to design sexual experiences that truly work for them. The role of fantasies. Sexual fantasies are a natural and healthy part of the human experience. Nagoski stresses that fantasies do not necessarily reflect what someone wants to happen in real life. They are more like the brain's playground, a safe space to explore possibilities without judgment. Many women feel shame about their fantasies, worrying they are strange or inappropriate. Nagoski reassures them that fantasies are simply one way the brain responds to erotic stimuli. They are neither good nor bad. They are normal. By embracing fantasies without shame, women can expand their sense of possibility and pleasure. Sharing fantasies with a partner can create intimacy, but it is equally valid to keep them private. What matters most is recognizing fantasies as a source of insight and enjoyment rather than as something to suppress. The impact of stress cycles on desire. Nagoski returns to stress as one of the most powerful brakes. She explains that stress is not just mental, but physiological. When your body senses threat, it activates a stress response that must be completed. If the cycle is left unfinished, the stress lingers, weighing down desire. Completing the stress cycle means allowing your body to release the tension. This can happen through movement like running or dancing, through affectionate touch like hugging or cuddling, through laughter, or even through crying. When the stress response is discharged, the body returns to equilibrium, making space for desire again. This concept is liberating because it shifts the focus from eliminating stress, to completing the cycle. Women cannot always control life stressors, but they can control how their bodies move through and release them. Couples who learn to support each other in completing stress cycles often notice a natural improvement in their sexual connection. Asterisk the importance of emotional connection. At the heart of sexual satisfaction lies emotional connection. Nagoski explains that sex is not only about physical sensations, but about meaning. When partners feel emotionally close, desire flows more easily. When emotional distance grows, breaks become stronger. Small gestures of care and attention, from listening to affirming words, build this connection. Nagoski highlights that many women report feeling most aroused when they feel loved, safe, and cherished. Sexuality thrives in an environment of trust and respect. This is why communication is essential. Talking openly about needs, preferences, and boundaries creates safety. Silence, by contrast, often breeds misunderstanding. Nagoski encourages couples to practice gentle honesty, even if it feels awkward at first, because clarity deepens intimacy. Asterisk the science of turn-ons and turn-offs. Nagoski invites readers to reflect on their unique turn-ons and turn-offs. These are not limited to sexual stimuli, but include the broader context of life. For example, turn-offs might include stress, feeling objectified, or lack of trust. Turn-ons might include affection, humor, novelty, or simply feeling relaxed. She explains that turn-ons and turn-offs are not fixed. They can evolve over time, shifting with life stages, health, and relationship dynamics. Acknowledging this fluidity helps women adapt instead of blaming themselves when their desires change. Couples who regularly talk about what turns them on and off build a flexible, supportive sexual relationship. The conversation itself becomes a form of intimacy, allowing both partners to feel understood. Asterisk why pleasure is political. One of the boldest arguments Nagoski makes is that women's pleasure is political. For centuries, female sexuality has been dismissed, shamed, or controlled. Myths about women being less sexual than men or women's orgasms being unimportant have deep cultural roots. Reclaiming pleasure, then, is not just personal but cultural. When women prioritize their own joy, they challenge centuries of oppressive narratives. Nagoski positions pleasure as a form of resistance against shame and control. This perspective is empowering. It reframes self-care and intimacy as acts of dignity and strength. Women who embrace pleasure reclaim agency over their bodies and their stories. Asterisk creating a sexually healthy relationship. Toward the later part of the book, Nagoski provides practical guidance for couples who want to build sustainable sexual intimacy. She explains that healthy sexuality is not about perfection but about ongoing attention. This includes creating rituals of affection, managing stress together, keeping playfulness alive, and respecting each other's differences in desire. It also means embracing change. A relationship may evolve through stages of high and low desire, but couples who stay curious and compassionate continue to find connection. She emphasizes that sexual well-being is not measured by frequency, but by satisfaction. Two people who share intimacy once a week but feel fulfilled are just as healthy as those who connect daily. What matters is that both partners feel cared for, desired, and satisfied.